Hey, welcome, stargazers. So I said I was going to take a break from doing all of this, and I am. But right now I'm taking a break from watching the confirmation hearings with the Senate for Pete Hegseth, whatever his, the drunk rapist from Fox News that the orange idiot is trying to put in charge of the Department of Defense. And I can't stomach anymore, so I'm taking a break. And if you haven't been paying attention to why this is a problem, you should probably look this up and see what's going on. Okay, so with that said, taking a break from that, I said, well, let me see what I can do. And I decided to look up the Los Angeles fire that is still blazing away as we speak. The challenge with this is that we don't need to do more tragedy porn, right? Just like going over and over and over disaster charts for why? Because you know how I feel about this, and my feeling is like knowing that the astrology chart for disaster is and recognizing these patterns is not going to prevent it from happening, and unless we can come up with something useful from this information. Why are we going over these charts? That's where I stand on that. So I said, well, you know what? Let's see if we can take a look, because it's been almost 6 days. It's been quite a few days. It's been almost a week, and it's still going. So I was like, maybe we can figure out when this is going to finally end, right? Now, here's the caveat. I've never done this before. So while I can read the chart and tell you all about the wheres and why-fors, mostly, right? When it comes to predicting when something like this is going to end, that's a whole other thing. So at this point, I'm speculating just like everybody else. So, but hope is always a good thing. So we're going to take a look at it and let's see what's going on. Alrighty, so this is the chart for the Los Angeles fire. Now they believe it started around 10:30 in the morning on January 7th, 2025. So that's the time that we're going to use. Now, there are a couple of things that are really notable about this chart that I want to go over. And I want to point some things out. So the first thing is that we're not always going to get big, huge, dramatic connections between an event and outer planets, because there's a lot of discussion about, Pluto and Los Angeles being on a Pluto return, right? Because Pluto in the Los Angeles chart is right here at 1 Aquarius, and we know Pluto just entered Aquarius, so it's right, Pluto's at 3 Aquarius, I'm so sorry, and Pluto has just entered Aquarius at 1 degree this last month or so. So you won't always get Pluto or outer planets configured in event charts like this. Now, one of the reasons that I'm bringing this up is that Pluto, while it does symbolize fire, you're not always going to get Pluto aspects for a fire event. However, what I will say is in this particular case, what Pluto is doing is signaling that this event may have much larger implications than just a local fire, which, after I think 7 days now, it's and multiple countries coming in to help, it has definitely turned into something much larger than a local fire. But the implications may be far beyond that. So it will be interesting to see how Pluto plays out in this particular event and situation. All right, so back to the chart. So here we have the chart, and at 10:30 in the morning, we have 25 Pisces rising. We have Neptune at 27 rising on the chart, as well as that North Node 1 Aries. Now, with this 25-degree Pisces rising, which we typically do not associate with fire, we would look at whatever connections we can find. So the first thing is obviously Neptune, outer planet, is with the ascendant. So this is suggesting to us that there are, the fickle finger of fate, there are much larger things involved. Now, again, there are people who would immediately see Neptune and go, oh, drugs, drug addicts, whoa, drunks, pick your thing, which is entirely possible. But in terms of what we're using this chart for, when it comes to the evolution of humanity and how events trigger or act as vehicles towards the challenges of that humanity, and the evolution of it. Sorry, my sewing basket. This is what we get. So with Neptune on the ascendant like this, what this is definitely indicating to us, pull it up a little bit bigger. Ooh, so exciting. What this is definitely indicating to us is there are much bigger pictures involved, right? Remember, and I said it before, I'll say it again, Pisces and Neptune has a lot to do with compassion and kindness and spiritual golden rules, right? And in this particular event, absolutely, whenever there's a devastating fire, whether it's one house or multiple houses or an entire city and community, compassion and kindness is the spiritual golden rule that we must adhere to, right? The test of your and measure of your character shows up in your ability to show compassion and kindness. And that's absolutely what we're talking about here. So I thought that was interesting. Now, the other thing, Neptune's at 25, right? Neptune at 25 degrees is Pisces as the ascendant. The anti-seer for this is Neptune at 5 Libra. Now, what's interesting about that is that Neptune at 5 Libra is actually the Neptune for the city of Los Angeles. So I've got their chart here. We're going to look at it in a second. But when you look at the chart for the city of Los Angeles, Neptune is their anti-seer. So this ascendant connects to the Neptune for Los Angeles as part of this fire event. So I thought that was an interesting connection. The other thing that's showing up, and there's a lot of activity in this chart connecting it to Los Angeles, okay? So the other thing I just want to point out is we've got a big honking T-square here. We've got Saturn in the fire chart already making a square to Jupiter in the fire chart. Remember, Gemini has to do with air movement and wind, okay? Saturn has a lot to do with karma and golden rules. So the thing about it is there are a lot of people, judgmental jerks who are hiding behind religion to make their sanctimonious behavior seem acceptable, that would say that California and Californians in Los Angeles, Hollywood, is being punished, for their evil deeds. And that's not necessarily true. Or Lord knows if that were the case, there's a whole bunch of religious people who are going straight to hell in a handbasket pretty damn quick, and not quick enough for their hypocrisy and hatefulness. Anyway, with Saturn in Pisces, what this could also be is indicative of an event or opportunity to, again, remember spiritual golden rules, to allow all of us to rise up to the challenge of our evolution, right? Our spiritual golden rule-ness, as it were. So Jupiter and Saturn is a test of character. It's your test of priorities. It's a test of, do you mean what you say, and do you do what you say you're going to do, right? Words versus actions. And of course, this is everything to do with belief systems. Gemini and Pisces has everything to do with belief systems. Remember, long ago in a couple of videos, we talked about it. Jupiter and Saturn are two sides of the same coin. It has everything to do with ethics and moral character, right? It's the principles involved. And it's the difference between academic principles, intellectual principles, Jupiter, versus lived principles, actionable principles, the things that we actually do based on principles, Saturn, right? So we are starting off this event, this fire event, with a Jupiter-Saturn square. So just like dry kindling, looking for something to ignite it, we needed something to turn this on, to trip that trigger, which turns out to be Saturn in the chart for the city of Los Angeles. So Jupiter and Saturn coming together in this T-square, or in this square, set up a T-square to the Saturn in the chart for the city of Los Angeles. So the city of Los Angeles may very well be receiving some type of penance or karmic retribution or karmic debt that they're paying off. There is definitely some type of karma and consequence involved on a spiritual level for the city of Los Angeles where this fire is concerned. But the purpose of this event may not be to punish them as much as to bring everyone, remember, it's all about leveling the playing field, to bring all of this, everyone down to their knees, to get really, really honest about where we've been and where we're going, right? So it's, in tragedy, we're given the opportunity to rise up to our better natures. And that may be what's going on here. But I thought that was interesting. So the Saturn for the city of Los Angeles is absolutely what sets up now, officially, the T-square in the fire event chart. The moon is here for the fire event at 27 Aries. Now, it is exactly conjunct the North Node at 27 Aries for the city of Los Angeles. Anytime we have node events, meaning that something is activating the node, typically what we're looking at are events that have to do with much larger scale things, right? Large swaths of people, large groups of people, like not individuals as much as entire groups of people. So it's like the difference between being by yourself in a car versus being on a bus with a bunch of other people. The nodes are always the bus because you're there with a whole bunch of other people, and the thing that's connecting you is this event. So I thought that was interesting that the moon in the fire chart is exactly conjunct the North Node for the city of Los Angeles. The other thing is that Mars here is at 29 Cancer. It's retrograde, but it's at 29 Cancer, so it is applying to that moon North Node activation here. So again, we've got this going on, and Mars absolutely rules fires. So I thought that was interesting as well. And that is it right off. Oh, so one more thing. The other thing that I thought was interesting, I think you guys enjoy seeing this as well. Transiting Sun in the fire chart is exactly conjunct Mars in the city of Los Angeles chart. So we've got a lot going on here in terms of activity. So Mars, right? Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn, right? The North Node and the moon ruling lots of people. We've got a whole lot of stuff and activity happening to give us some indication that obviously this was fated. I mean, you don't need an astrology chart to figure that out. But also, too, this would suggest to me, and your opinions might be different, so feel free to put a comment about that. This suggests to me that there is a greater hand at work, right? Because of all of this Saturn involved. Saturn in the North Node. There's something much bigger going on here. Now, with the Sun, just as an aside, right? The Sun conjuncting the city of Los Angeles, Mars. The Sun is a hot, fiery, dry planet, and Mars is also a hot, fiery, dry planet. The two together will lend themselves to very hot, dry, fiery conditions. So this was the perfect combination of things to release a fire or a conflagration. Mars, while it does rule fires, is still in the sign of Cancer. Okay, and it's retrograde. So Mars is weak here. So it's not, I don't feel like Mars is strong enough in here to have caused this huge, out of control wildfire that we're looking at, as much as this Sun on the Los Angeles Mars that we're dealing with. Mars at 29 Cancer retrograde, which, Mars rules fires, squaring the North Node and the moon, I think has a lot to do with these are residences that were getting burned up. So my limited understanding is that California and some parts are prone to wildfires anyway, but this is very specifically residences and homes and communities, Cancer, okay? And the moon in the North Node, it's the general population, the community, people, actual people, as opposed to forests and wildfires. So I thought that was interesting. So now let's take a look at some other charts. Okay. So this is a tri-wheel. Don't let it confuse you. For right now, what I really just want you to focus on is the center wheel, right here. This in the middle is the chart for the city of Los Angeles. So we don't know what time the city was incorporated, so we're using a 12 noon chart, which honestly you can ignore, right? So the angles I would ignore. We don't actually know what the angles are because we don't have a time of birth, as it were, right? Because remember, we're using noon because we don't know. We just don't know. All right, so we're just going to use the planets. So with the planets, remember that Saturn we talked about in the other chart? Right? Remember this one? Because we were talking about how the Saturn was part of this T-square, right? With the fire event. Well, here's the Saturn. Oh, here we go. Here's the Saturn in the Los Angeles chart. Now, their Saturn, okay, is actually part of their own square. So one of the things that we're looking at is their sun is at 12 Virgo, and it is part of a square, a natural square in the chart. as it stands. So with a Sun-Saturn square like this, what you get typically are you get environments where, one, being thin, very lean, very leggy is very important, right? Saturn, Capricorn, air, like England is very Capricorn country, and they're very much about their skinny, leggy blondes, but they're all about thin, like underfed and long legs, right? So we would expect the same thing here in Los Angeles. We would also, with a Sun-Saturn square like this, with Virgo and Sag, typically this emphasis is on the age groups of the late teens, early 20s. So there's a high market value for people in those ages. Above and beyond and outside of that, it may be a little bit more difficult to find yourself feeling valued or appreciated, which I think is the case, right? In some places, now remember, listen, some places, being a child is what gives you value, especially if you're a woman. I mean, we still have child brides in Afghanistan, for God's sakes, right? So the high value woman there is 10. Ugh. Anyway, religious. You can thank religion for that. Anyway, the other thing was a Sun-Saturn square. Squares are always going to emphasize or exaggerate things. So with a Sun-Saturn square out of Virgo and Sag, what we also typically get are people or a culture that is very health conscious, right? So it's not about living long, it's about living younger, longer, right? In China, they believe in long life. Like longevity is very important to them. It has a high value. But for them in Asia, longevity and long life, it's okay to be old. You're supposed to be old if you've lived a long time, right? However, in this particular culture, with a Sun-Saturn square, because the square is always a blockage or a sticking point, right? With the Sun-Saturn square of Virgo and Sagittarius, the sticking point is the early 20s. Once you get past the early 20s, it's an issue. So for them, health and longevity may be important, but only if they can live longer, younger, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not from Los Angeles, so somebody will have to confirm or deny that for me. The other thing is with, and this is an interesting thing, you'll see this in natal charts, right? So when you have people with Virgo, Sag squares like this, typically they tend to be a little scatterbrained or a little bit of an airhead. So they're alternately very perfectionistic and very anal and really want to get things right, but it's kind of a can't see the forest for the trees situation where they're so busy hyper-focusing on details or the stuff right in front of them that they have difficulty seeing the bigger picture, right? So they tend to come off as a little scatterbrained, a little airheaded, which I thought was interesting. I don't know that that's the culture in California or Los Angeles specifically, but maybe it is. Again, you guys, if you're familiar with the area, you'll have to fill me in. Okay, also too, and this is I thought was interesting, right? Virgo and Sagittarius, and certainly Sun and Saturn in Virgo and Sagittarius, has a lot to do with writers, right? So typically when I think of writers, I always think of New York. But I would expect a much more competitive and a much more guarded, controlled environment where writers are concerned, right? More than musicians and entertainers. So I thought that was surprising. Certainly entertainment is a very big deal because, it is Los Angeles. But there is that. Also, too, and please, if you're familiar with the area, please help me out here. With a Sun-Saturn square like this in Virgo and Sagittarius, what I would also expect is a significant and ongoing problem from the time of its inception with illness, honestly. Homelessness, illness. So you would have two extremes, kind of like Washington, D.C. You would literally have these people walking around with more money than God. And directly across the street, people are so poor they're living in, inside cardboard boxes on the street. So I suspect that some of that may be an issue out there as well. The wealth disparity. Anyway. Now, what's interesting about the Los Angeles chart also, too, is they've got a Venus-Neptune conjunction. Now, Neptune rules glamour and film and music and entertainment and escapism. And that's exactly what we think of when we think of Los Angeles and Hollywood, right? And with Venus and Neptune together, and Venus loves being in Libra, and they're both in Libra also. Venus loves being in Libra. So Venus and Neptune together in Libra would heighten and exaggerate and reinforce and strengthen things that have to do with beauty and escapism and glamour and deception, right? Because I mean, listen, when we're telling stories for entertainment, we're not telling stories to tell the truth. We're telling stories to entertain and help people escape and live in fantasies, right? And that's all Hollywood stuff. That's why we go to the movies. So them being the mecca, and the source of entertainment globally, because they're a big deal in terms of global entertainment, makes all kinds of sense, that Venus-Neptune. Now, here's where things get a little weird, right? So with Venus and Neptune together in Libra, one of the things we might also expect is a lot of deception, okay, about the inner workings of how, literally, how how the sausage is made, right? Everybody likes the sausage, but nobody wants to know how it's made. So there may be a whole lot of that going on that's literally hidden and kept behind the scenes. And the reason I say that is because Venus and Neptune and Libra, any of these three, but certainly all three together, they don't like getting their hands dirty. They don't like dealing with ugliness. They don't want to know about it. So they want the surface image of things to be as beautiful as possible, okay? Which means that they are more than happy to hide and sweep under the rug and cover up and disguise and basically deny anything that's not pleasant, or considered very, let me get you close up, very attractive or reflecting very well on themselves. So with a Sun-Saturn square like this and this Venus-Neptune conjunction in Libra like this, I expect there's a whole lot of skeletons in Los Angeles and Hollywood that they don't want people knowing about. And this is not recent. This would have been going on since the beginning of the whole golden age glamour sort of stuff. So, and again, if you're one of these religious people, it's like, oh, they're getting punished for their sins or whatever. Like, listen, as long as you've ever gone to the movies or listened to music or benefited from entertainment, you are part of the process, because without your consumption, they can't exist. And the fact of the matter is, here's a little known fact. Look this up. There's a religious group called the Shakers. They were a subgroup of the Quakers. And the Shakers did not believe in indulgences like music and dance and play. Like, they felt that those types of pleasures were sins and should be avoided. So they were a very austere sect of the Quakers. Very simple lives, very austere, very strict, right? No pleasure for us. Thank you very much. And they, pretty much died out in a couple of generations. And so there's nothing wrong with pleasure, although some people would convince you otherwise. And at the end of the day, your ability to experience pleasure is the definition of mental health, right? Because when do we know you're depressed? When you're not even enjoying the things you should be enjoying. So, listen, let's get off the whole, like, oh, you dirty sinner, oh, punishment, oh, like, let's get off that. Okay, and let's just accept it for what it is. But understand that since the inception of Los Angeles and certainly the beginning of the golden era and the glamour age, right? There's everybody likes sausage. Nobody wants to know how the sausage is made. There's probably a whole lot of stuff that goes into becoming the monolith that they have been in the entertainment industry that we, happily don't want to know about, and we don't ask, and they know that. But, we'll see, right? We'll see. So I just thought that was interesting, because Libra hates a mess, hates a freaking mess. Okay. So what else we have here? So this is, again, the middle ring is the Los Angeles chart. Mars is in Capricorn in the Los Angeles chart. Mars in Capricorn is going to make this a very business city. So interestingly, Mars in Capricorn, now it's wide. I don't typically use it, but it is still there, right? So it's in a wide square to Venus and Neptune. The moon is in opposition. Let me make this a little bigger for you. The moon, see that? Too big. There we go. The moon is in opposition to that Venus-Neptune, okay? So there are some things that are not great about what we're seeing here, right? And again, this is not specific to Los Angeles. This goes on globally. It's a problem. And there are reasons this problem exists. And, I'm just saying, look, let's not scapegoat Los Angeles as if they're the only place this happens. And that's where the problem started and it's going to end, because that's not the case. Remember, there are places in this world where they're literally marrying off 10-year-old girls as child brides. Some of them here in the United States. And or, literally surgically deforming these girls. Just anyway. So there's a whole lot of woman hating going on. That's part of the problem. All right. So with the moon opposing Venus and Neptune here, moon in Aries, Venus and Neptune in Libra. Again, everybody likes sausage. Nobody wants to know how the pig is made. So also too, glamour, youth, and women, because Aries has to do with young people, right? The moon in Aries, moon has to do with women. Moon in Aries opposing Venus and Neptune. There's a lot of glamorization and overemphasis, a hyperfixation on young women, right? How young? That's another story and question by itself. But again, child brides, even here in the United States outside of Los Angeles. So you can't get too mad at them for that. Mars is in Capricorn, squaring Venus and Neptune in Libra. It's a wide square, but it's there. This is typically a signature for somebody who's very mercenary in their affections. Sugar babies, prostitutes, and girls who swear up and down you're the only second person they've ever slept with in life, after they've done the entire football team. Who will literally marry old men for their money, right? These young girls that marry middle-aged men. This is typically what you find with a Venus-Neptune-Mars square, right? So it's the ability to lie to yourself and to lie to other people to get what you need in terms of financial resources. Mars and Capricorn. So there's a whole lot of that, selling your soul to the devil to get what you need going on in Los Angeles, right? And it's just accepted and given. And when you think about it, if you look at the movies that we've had forever, right? Leading men could be 60, 70, 80 years old, and the leading lady is always what? 20, 18, maybe? Because, that happens so often. That's so realistic. Okay. All right. So there's that. I thought that was interesting, right? But it is definitely a business city. There's a whole lot of, because this Mars and Capricorn is a very powerful position when it comes to business. There's a whole lot of moving and shaking going on in terms of business that comes out of here. So DC may have a lot of power on the global stage in terms of wheeling and dealing, right? It's a different kind of power when it comes to money and business, right? Not in the handful of like a few people like Bezos and Muskrat or whatever his name is, but just in general, this is a power town. So there's a lot going on in here, okay? Now, here's what I thought was also interesting. If you look, they have Jupiter in Scorpio, right? So the city of Los Angeles has Jupiter in Scorpio. Jupiter in Scorpio is, again, like Mars and Capricorn, huge business sign. These two things together, these are huge business signatures, right? So there's, in terms of money passing through hands and business deals and like big power plays, this is where it's at. So again, I don't know anything about Los Angeles. So if you can help me out with this, I'd appreciate it. And maybe even more so than the government and DC. And I'm wondering if that's not the case, because entertainment is universal and nobody ever turns their nose up at entertainment. None of us can resist it. We love escapism and entertainment. It's part of what helps us get through the day, right? And politics and, the government, all sort of stuff has a lot more to do with access to resources and power, like raw power. But when it comes to actually having masses of power, masses of resources and influence, I think Los Angeles may be like a huge center of something significant. So I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe you guys can fill me in. But I thought that was interesting. Now, the other thing with Jupiter and Scorpio is very much about sex, power, literally eat or be eaten. Like Jupiter and Scorpio is not a nice place to have it. It takes a lot of personal work to evolve from that Jupiter Scorpio at the low vibration to a higher vibration, right? It takes a lot of personal will and oftentimes a lot of really life-changing events for the person to get humbled enough to finally get out of that toxic Jupiter and Scorpio nonsense, right? Because they're ballers. They're absolutely about ballers, right? Big power plays, big money, big everything, right? and, climbing all over everybody on their way to the top. And not just because they're ambitious, although certainly that's the case here, but also because they enjoy it, right? So I'm not saying they're evil, but I'm just saying if they were a person who's going to enjoy all the nastiness it takes to climb to the top on the way, Jupiter and Scorpio is your person. And it takes a lot for that type of personality to be humbled. And that's the only way they ever rise to a higher vibration, right? So the city of Los Angeles is that culture. So that may be part of what's going on. It's they're being brought to their knees because whatever's going on in this fire, this is going to play out until March or April. Now we're talking about that in a second. But this is whether they care to see it or not, they're being given a second chance. But you can't tell people that. They have to figure it out for themselves. Anyway, so there's that. Okay. Now, also, too, they've got the North Node down here at 27 Aries. We'll talk about that with a fire event chart connecting to it. The North Node in Aries has a lot to do with, are you ready? Has a lot to do with being willing, having the courage to be yourself, even if it means being unpopular, right? And everything in Los Angeles and Hollywood is about being popular because it's entertainment, obviously. And we've all heard the stories about Californians, like in New York, like how do they say, yo, buddy, what is it? Go F yourself. In New York, they go, yo, buddy, go F yourself, right? And then, of course, in California, how do they tell you to go F yourself? In California, they go, oh, have a nice day. So popularity apparently is a big currency in Los Angeles and Hollywood, I imagine, because I think Hollywood's in Los Angeles. But that North Node tells us a different story. That North Node wants you, and this is for individual charts as well, that North Node in Aries wants you to like yourself enough, to have enough confidence in yourself, to be brave enough to be yourself, even if it means being unpopular, not sacrificing your identity for popularity. Okay, so I thought that was interesting. This came up in the Los Angeles chart. All right, now let's take a look at something. Okay, so again, we're back to the charts. Now this is the tri-wheel chart, so let me explain. So the middle ring is Los Angeles, the city, that's their chart. The next ring out, this is considered the middle ring, right? This is the chart or the planetary positions for the Los Angeles fire. And then the very, very outer chart is the transits as of today. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. These charts are a little confusing to look at. Don't feel bad if you're overwhelmed. It takes me a couple of seconds to adjust my eyes to figure out what I'm looking at as well, because they can get confusing, which is why we typically don't use these charts unless we absolutely have to. Okay, so we know, it's a little bit bigger. All right, so we know that we have a big old honking T-square here with the sun, or I'm sorry, it's not a T-square, it is a grand cross, forgive me, which makes this even bigger, right? So we know with the square in the Los Angeles city chart and the square between Jupiter and Saturn in the fire event chart, combined, we now have a grand cross, okay? So our grand cross consists of Jupiter and Saturn and Sun and Saturn. So we've got an emphasis on Saturn, okay? We have the sun involved, like this is huge. So the sun has everything to do with identity, okay? Saturn has to do with consequences, right? The consequences or the spiritual consequences of things. And Jupiter, of course, has to do with, the golden rule, right? Jupiter and Saturn both being two sides of the same coin, okay? So whatever this event was, we know that it was absolutely integral to the clarification and the identity formation or changing of the city of Los Angeles and its culture. And apparently, I don't know, because again, you guys got to help me out here. But from what a little bit I'm hearing, the places that have burned down, all sort of stuff, like this is huge, huge. It's going to change a whole lot of stuff. This is literally a game changer. So, of course, we've got the moon. Now, the thing about the moon in the Los Angeles chart is that this moon, give or take a couple of degrees, because we don't actually know what time the city was incorporated. So what we do know for sure is that it is early Aries. So with that moon in early Aries, we also know that the North Node is there, right? These things are happening. And also, we've got the moon and North Node with the event in the fire chart, because this is the fire chart moon conjunct the North Node for Los Angeles. And over here, we've got the moon for Los Angeles, give or take a few degrees, right? With the North Node of the fire chart. So definitely this was an event, because the nodes are involved, that was going to impact many, many random people whose only connection to each other may have very well been the event itself, okay? Some of the other things that are happening, so we know that the sun was conjuncting the Mars. So the event chart for the fire is the sun conjuncting the Mars for Los Angeles. Okay, so this would have absolutely brought some stuff to light. Now, what's interesting is that the sun always illuminates things, just like Uranus illuminates things. So with Mars here, with that sun conjuncting Mars like this, I'm wondering what's going to end up being exposed as a result of this fire. And it may not necessarily be anything specific to Los Angeles. This may actually have to do with the insurance companies, which we're hearing about, right? The snakes in the grass. It could have everything to do with that Venus-Neptune we've been talking about, right? And all the sausage making nobody wants to know about. So there's a whole lot here that may end up getting exposed that we don't know. Now, the thing about it is these two things together, this is a powerful combination, Sun and Mars. What it could also be is that as a result of this event, the people of Los Angeles may actually be the driving force to cause reforms to happen as a result of this fire. So they may be the thing that finally brings these insurance companies to task. I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. So all this brings us now to, so when is this going to end, right? When is this going to end? So I was looking at it, and I could be wrong. I'm going to pull my notes up here real quick. I could be wrong, but because honestly, I'll tell you, I really thought that they would have these fires contained and under control by today. But obviously that is not the case. So they've got it more under control, but there's still, I think it's the Palisades. There's still an area that's still well out of control. They're expecting more winds, so it's going to flare up again. So we're not there yet. So I'm thinking that with the 18th and 19th, these are pivotal days, okay? Venus will be at 16 Pisces, and it will be conjuncting the Saturn for the fire event chart, which will also set up a wide square to the natal Saturn for the Los Angeles city. But for the fire chart, Venus will be conjuncting that Saturn, which should bring some relief, right? Venus is probably the only thing that can get the Saturn and get Saturn to calm down. On the 19th, the very next day, so within 24 hours, Mercury will be at 16 Capricorn, and it will be conjuncting the Sun. So Mercury will be down here on the 19th, right, involving that Sun and Mars. So this is going to be a very pivotal day, the 19th. But again, the 18th, these two things are with each other. So we're looking at that, right? Because remember, it's always about combinations in astrology. The North Node will be at 29 Pisces that day. More importantly, it will be stationing direct, okay? That North Node, as it stations direct, will be stationing direct right here on Neptune. And remember, in the fire event chart, Neptune rises on the chart, okay? So that's why I was thinking, well, that's what I'm thinking. So I'm thinking the 18th and 19th, right? This should finally get completely under control. Now, the problem is, the challenges are, again, I honestly thought that we would have this under control by now on the 13th, because we had the full moon this month. Like right now, it's conjuncting Mars, it's squaring the moon, right? It's all in here. And this is like things are hitting fever pitch right now with the full moon. So because the full moon brings everything to absolute peak crisis mode. So I wholly expected this to be done by today, but maybe within a couple of days. So if today's the 13th with this full moon, and we're looking at a pivotal change on the 18th and 19th, we're still looking at least 6 days, 6, 7, 8, 9, like 6 more days of this before it's completely under control. If I'm correct, I could be wrong. And that means that this fire will have gone on for 2 weeks. That's just unbelievable. Unfreaking believable. So there's that. Now, the thing about it is we're not out of the woods yet, right? Because we've got aspects that are hitting the Los Angeles chart well into February. So February 4th and February 23rd, Jupiter and Mars will both station direct at 11 and 17. So we've got an emphasis around these middling degrees of Gemini. Well, remember, Los Angeles has their Saturn at 13 Sag, which is the opposite of this degree where Jupiter and Mars are both going to station direct. The Sun also is at 12 Virgo, which is going to involve these middling degrees of Gemini. So here, February 4th, and February 23rd, Jupiter and Mars will both go direct at 11 and 17 Gemini. So whatever's going on with this fire, like we're still looking at well into February before this finally gets resolved, right? So there's more going on here than just fire. And obviously, you know, if you've had the house burned down, right? You know, rebuilding, all that sort of stuff. Like, it's not like the fire's over and then you just move back in your house. So there's clearly, we know there's some timelines involved before this gets sorted out. But I think in terms of the purpose of this fire, in terms of evolution and large scale things, as it impacts entire communities and groups of people, it's going to be in February when it all becomes very, very clear where we're going to go with this and why. One of the things that this has provided an opportunity to happen. Okay. Now, here's the last thing I'll give you guys. I thought this was interesting. So remember, we talk about eclipses, and eclipses have like a 6-month window, right? So we talk about it a lot. We don't necessarily pay attention. So back in October of 2024, we had an eclipse at 10 Libra. Okay. That 10 Libra is conjuncting Venus and Neptune in Libra in the Los Angeles chart. Look at this. So in October of 2024, we had an eclipse at 10 Libra conjuncting the Venus-Neptune for Los Angeles. So clearly nothing huge like this happened then, but it is happening now. And guess what? We are in the 6-month window. The 6-month window, when this comes to a close and that window closes and this eclipse period is completely over, as it involves that Venus-Neptune, okay, it's going to be April. So whatever's going on with this fire, February should bring out like the reveal, the big revelation, the reveal about how this fire is playing out in terms of bigger picture stuff for the large groups of people involved, because there's, again, Pluto's involved, and Pluto has to do with the masses and change and transformation. Pluto, there's a bigger picture involved here. This is not just about the local community getting burned. This is big stuff, right? So by the time we get to February, we should have a much more clear indication about what this is about. And that will bring us close to the closing of this eclipse. So by the time we get to April 2025, the fallout should be clear, and everything at that point should be moving according to schedule, depending on what's going on. So that is my treatment of the Los Angeles fire chart. So I hate to say, and I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm really hoping I'm wrong. But I think we may have until the 19th, the 18th or 19th of this month before this fire is completely under control. Because honestly, I really thought it would be today. They'd be done by today. So 18th or 19th, and it's going to be February before the smoke clears and we can see like what we're dealing with in terms of where we need to go as a result of this and what larger evolutionary pictures this fire has served. Because this is not just about a little teeny tiny community. This is about big stuff. A whole bunch of people being taken the carpet, which may be far above and beyond, the Los Angelinos. This may actually have a lot more to do with insurance companies and the government and all sorts of stuff. And also to remember, Saturn is involved. Saturn is involved, and Saturn is absolutely being pulled in with a fire event chart. There's a lot of Saturn signature, right? There's a lot of Saturn signature in this chart, okay, and this event. So there's some very important karmic payoffs, debts that are being paid right now and are going to continue to play out as the evolutionary wheel turns and we move forward with this particular episode and the cleanup continues. So that's it. That's my take on the Los Angeles fire event chart and the city of Los Angeles. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and what bigger pictures are involved here. And of course, if you have any information, please by all means share it, because I live on the East Coast, so I'm not that familiar with California or Hollywood or Los Angeles culture. And again, this is just a diversion to get me away from the Senate confirmation hearings for Jesus. Anyway. So hang in there, folks. We're going to get there. Like, progress is messy. We're going to get there. But you got to keep your mind in the right place. And you've got to keep your heart in the right place. So if you can help, anything you can do to help in this time is very important, because judgment has no place in situations like this. And it's very much about compassion and kindness. Remember, Neptune's only in Pisces a couple more months. Okay, and Saturn's only going to be in Pisces for a couple more months this year, and then it's gone too. Then we're going to have Neptune in Aries, Saturn in Aries. So what you see is what you get at that point. So if we don't get it together now, okay, and start living our spiritual golden rules, then we're not. If you think you're unhappy now, wait until you see what you get. If you let this continue, all right. So you let the people who hide behind religion to fortify their sanctimonious nonsense, so they can pass judgment, feel good about themselves. Like, you just let them be who they are, right? There's a special place in hell for people like that. In the meantime, you have yourself to take care of. Keep your mind right. And you have the people around you. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to Pluto and fire and spiritual fires, right, or Kundalini fires, you only ever have yourself to work with. What's in here is what you have to work with, ever. That and the charity and kindness of other people. We don't get through this alone. We get through this together. All right.